The trees in Newton, a Boston suburb, were beginning to bud with the arrival of spring. Rebecca Monroe gazed out the window of her laboratory and sighed deeply. As the leader of a new drug development project in the clinical research division of biotech, a major pharmaceutical company, her desk was piled high with incomplete data sheets. Looking at the clock, she saw it was past 6. Working late again, she muttered to herself as she picked up her cell phone and found a message from her son Aiden. "Mom, when are you coming home today?" Simple words, but Rebecca could sense the loneliness behind them. She replied immediately, "I'll be home soon. Let's make dinner together tonight." 30 minutes later, Rebecca arrived at her 2-story home in a quiet Boston suburb. As she opened the front door, her 8-year-old son Aiden came running toward her. "Mom! We learned about dinosaur fossils at school today. I want to be a paleontologist when I grow up." Rebecca smiled and stroked her son's head. "That's wonderful. But didn't you say last week you wanted to be a rocket engineer?" "Yes, but this week it's dinosaurs." Aiden showed a carefree smile. "Aiden, have you finished your homework?" "No, I still have a little left." "Then finish it while I prepare dinner." "Isn't Dad home yet?" Aiden shrugged. "I don't know. He didn't say he was coming home." Rebecca sighed deeply again. Her husband Brian was successful as a financial analyst, but lately he had been coming home late more often. Important meetings with clients, projects with approaching deadlines, always the same excuses. While making salad in the kitchen, Rebecca reflected on their relationship. Entering their 10th year of marriage, their once passionate relationship had become buried in daily busyness. Still, they had been happy, at least until last summer. Brian began to change when his business trips to New York increased. Not only was he coming home late, but an emotional distance had grown between them. He showed less interest in Aiden too, and stopped attending his weekend baseball games. The kitchen door opened, and Brian entered with a tired expression. "Hey," he greeted briefly, taking a beer from the refrigerator. "You're late again today," Rebecca said calmly. "Yes, the final adjustments for the Marriott project ran long," Brian answered without making eye contact. "Aiden's baseball game is this Saturday."
Can you imagine making $10,000 a month just from YouTube, all from home? That's exactly what I did with Candlelight Stories. No face, no voice. Check the link in the description if you're curious.
"You'll come this time, won't you?" "Saturday, that might be difficult. I have a golf appointment with a client." Rebecca said, while vigorously chopping carrots. "Aiden is looking forward to it." "Is work more important to you than your son?" Tension filled the room. Brian didn't answer and walked away to the living room. After putting Aiden to bed that evening, Rebecca called her sister Vanessa. "Hey, Vanessa. Can you talk now?" From the other end of the line came her sister's cheerful voice. "Of course. I just finished my night shift. Is something wrong?" Vanessa worked as a nurse in the pediatric ward at Boston General Hospital. The sisters looked alike, but their personalities were complete opposites. While Rebecca was methodical and cautious, Vanessa was impulsive and emotional. Rebecca had always been the good child, trying to meet her parents' expectations, while Vanessa had a prolonged rebellious phase that continued to worry their parents. "It's about Brian," Rebecca said quietly. "He's been really strange lately. I feel like he's hiding something. Come to think of it, I saw Brian near the hospital last week. But he didn't seem to notice me. He was walking with a young woman." Rebecca's heart nearly stopped. "What did you say?" "Don't jump to conclusions," Vanessa quickly added. "She could have been a colleague. But I have thought his behavior has been odd lately." After hanging up, Rebecca lay on her bed staring at the ceiling. Was her husband really having an affair? Or was it just her imagination? The next morning, an emergency call from school changed Rebecca's world. "Mrs. Monroe, I hate to tell you this, but Aiden collapsed during physical education class. He's being taken to the hospital by ambulance now. Rebecca felt the blood drain from her face. Which hospital? Boston General Hospital. What a coincidence. The hospital where her sister worked. Rebecca immediately drove there. The pediatric ward at Boston General Hospital was decorated in bright colors, but to Rebecca even that seemed gray. 3 weeks had passed since Aiden's admission. The diagnosis was a rare autoimmune disease, a type of juvenile idiopathic arthritis, requiring long-term hospitalization and strict medication therapy. Aiden was quietly reading a book in his bed by the window. The image of the once energetic boy had faded, his complexion was poor and he had lost weight, which broke Rebecca's heart. "How are you feeling today?" Rebecca sat next to her son and gently stroked his hair. "Better than yesterday. But my legs hurt," Aiden smiled weakly. Rebecca carefully checked Aiden's medical records. Her researchers didn't miss the strange patterns. Aiden's symptoms weren't improving as the doctors had predicted, rather, they were inexplicably worsening and improving in cycles. His temperature fluctuated irregularly, and the joint swelling was unpredictable. "I'm missing something," Rebecca muttered to herself in the hallway after speaking with the doctor. Even the specialists were puzzled by the fluctuations in symptoms. She couldn't understand what was happening in her son's body. While having a late lunch in the hospital cafeteria, Rebecca checked her phone. The message from Brian was as curt as ever: "We'll be late again today. Going to the hospital tomorrow." She laughed bitterly. Her husband had hardly visited the hospital since their son was admitted, making excuses about important meetings and dinners with clients. Her phone rang again. This time it was from Vanessa. "Can you talk now? It's important." "What is it?" Rebecca called her sister from a corner of the cafeteria. "You might not believe this." Vanessa's voice was tense. "I just saw Brian at the hospital. But he didn't go to Aiden's room. He was talking with a young woman in the third-floor hallway." Rebecca froze. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. They were talking closely. And the woman wasn't a nurse." After ending the call, Rebecca couldn't control her agitation. Her husband hadn't mentioned coming to the hospital. And he was meeting another woman there. Doubts began to eat away at her heart. That night, after Brian had fallen asleep, Rebecca gathered her courage and picked up his cell phone. The password was her son's birthday. It hadn't changed for years. The screen unlocked, and she checked his messages, trembling with guilt and fear. She found it immediately. Frequent exchanges with a woman named Samantha. Recent messages included, "Let's meet at the usual place tomorrow," and, "Don't worry, she doesn't know anything." Rebecca's chest ached. Looking further, she found strange keywords in his browser history: how to obtain steroids, buying medicine without prescription, immunosuppressant side effects. She put down the phone, confused. Was her husband not only having an affair but also involved in something dangerous? And the most terrifying thought crossed her mind: could these searches be related to Aiden's illness? The next morning, Rebecca's eyes were red and swollen from lack of sleep. When she arrived at the hospital, Dr. Parker, Aiden's attending physician, stopped her. "Mrs. Monroe, I'd like to talk to you about Aiden's latest test results." The doctor's expression was serious. "Last night, abnormal values appeared in your son's blood test. The concentrations don't seem to be from the medication therapy." "What do you mean?" Rebecca's heart raced. "I can't say for certain, but there may be substances in his body other than what's been prescribed." Rebecca felt dizzy. "Are you saying someone did something to Aiden?" Dr. Parker chose his words carefully. "Not necessarily. It could be a testing error, or it could be the effect of something he ate. We'll conduct additional tests." On her way to Aiden's room, Rebecca passed the mother of the patient in the next bed in the hallway. She lowered her voice. "Mrs. Monroe, I wasn't sure if I should tell you this. Last night, I woke up in the middle of the night and saw a man putting something into Aiden's fore. She had an anxious expression. It was dark, so I couldn't see well, but I don't think it was a nurse. Rebecca's world collapsed. She immediately rushed to Aiden's room. Her son was sleeping quietly. She checked the fore bag but found nothing unusual. However, her heart was certain. Someone was trying to harm Aiden. And that someone might be the person she trusted most. That evening, Rebecca visited her colleague Michael at the lab. He was knowledgeable about security systems. Michael, I need a small surveillance camera. Preferably one that's not noticeable. Did something happen? Michael asked with concern. It's for Aiden's safety, she answered briefly. Hours later, Rebecca picked up Aiden's favorite teddy bear. She carefully placed the small camera Michael had lent her inside the stuffed animal, setting it up to send live video to her smartphone. I have an experiment that will take all night tomorrow, Rebecca told Brian that evening. I can't go to the hospital, could you tell Aiden? Brian nodded without making eye contact. Okay. Don't worry, Aiden. Mom can't come tomorrow, but Dad and your aunt will come check on you, Rebecca kissed her son's forehead. Mom, come back soon, Aiden smiled with a pale face. Of course. Mom will be back the morning after tomorrow. Rebecca squeezed her son's hand. Her chest was full of pain and anxiety. If her suspicion was correct, the person she trusted most had been harming her son. The thought was unbearable, but she couldn't ignore her maternal instinct. Before leaving the room, Rebecca spoke to Jennifer, the nurse at the nursing station. I'll be at the lab all night tomorrow for an experiment. If anything happens, call this number, she handed a note with her hotel room phone number. And, if there's any change in Aiden's condition, even something small, please let me know. Jennifer smiled reassuringly. Don't worry, Mrs. Monroe. We're watching your son carefully. I'm on duty, so I'll keep an eye on him all night. Rebecca expressed her gratitude and left the hospital after looking back at Aiden's room one more time. She left the hospital carefully to avoid being noticed, wearing sunglasses and a hat as a light disguise. Then she returned to the hospital through the back entrance and walked to the hotel she had reserved. The hotel room was simple but clean and quiet. Rebecca took out her laptop and began setting up. When she launched the app Michael had configured for her, a live video feed of Aiden's hospital room appeared. The camera was cleverly hidden in the teddy bear's eye position, placed at an angle that could overlook the entire room. All right, ready to go, she took a deep breath. Tonight, I'll know the truth. The clock showed 8 p.m. In the video, Aiden was reading in bed. 30 minutes later, Jennifer entered the room, checked his vital signs, administered medication, chatted with Aiden for a bit, and then left. At 9:30 p.m., Brian visited the hospital room. He had brought a digital game for Aiden. Rebecca stared intently at the screen. There was nothing suspicious about Brian's behavior. He spent a short time with his son and left before 10 o'clock, saying, I'll come again tomorrow. Nothing yet, Rebecca muttered. She continued drinking coffee, not taking her eyes off the video. At 10:30 p.m., Vanessa entered the hospital room. Dressed in a white nurse's uniform, she gently called out to Aiden. Hey, Aiden. Still awake? Your aunt is here. Aunt Vanessa. Aiden's face lit up. I heard from your mom. She can't come today because of an experiment. Are you lonely? No, I'm okay. She said she'd be back the day after tomorrow. Vanessa sat on Aiden's bed and began talking about the book he was holding. Their conversation was pleasant, and Rebecca's tension eased a bit. After talking for about 30 minutes, Vanessa said, It's late, so go to sleep. Sweet dreams, and left the room. Is nothing going to happen? Rebecca sighed. Was her suspicion unfounded? Or. The night deepened. The lights in the ward were dimmed, and the stillness of midnight settled in. Rebecca fought off sleep while drinking coffee. The clock had passed 1 a.m. Suddenly, a shadow appeared on the screen. Someone was quietly opening the door to the hospital room and entering. The shadow moved carefully, visible even in the dim lighting of the hospital room. Rebecca held her breath, glued to the screen. The shadow approached Aiden's bed. The person was wearing nurse's clothing, but their face wasn't visible. They stopped in front of the 4 stand and took something out. Rebecca watched in frozen terror as the shadow injected something into the 4 bag. "Who is it?" she whispered in a hoarse voice. When the shadow put away the syringe and raised their face, Rebecca's heart nearly stopped. The face revealed was that of her sister, Vanessa. "No." Rebecca stared at the screen in disbelief. "Vanessa, why?" Various questions raced through her mind. What had Vanessa injected into Aiden? Why would she do such a thing? Rebecca immediately picked up her cell phone, first calling hospital security, then the police. Boston General Hospital Pediatric Ward, Room 508. "Someone is administering suspicious drugs to my son. I have video evidence." Her voice was trembling. After hanging up, Rebecca quickly closed her laptop and rushed out of the hotel. She ran the short distance to the hospital and, having no patience to wait for the elevator, ran up the stairs. When she arrived at the 5th floor, out of breath, security staff were already standing in front of Aiden's room. Mrs. Monroe, Martha, the head nurse, rushed toward her. "Thank you for coming so quickly." "Aiden?" Rebecca asked, breathing heavily. "He's fine. A doctor will examine him immediately. After receiving your call, we replaced the 4 immediately." Rebecca sighed with relief. Peering into Aiden's hospital room, she saw her son still asleep, lying quietly as if nothing had happened. Security staff were standing guard outside the room. Mrs. Monroe, Martha guided her to a quiet place in the hallway. "I need to talk to you." Her expression was grave. "Actually, we had some concerning footage on our night monitors too." "What footage?" Rebecca asked with a tense expression. "We had recently noticed discrepancies in our medication inventory, so we installed security cameras in each room." Martha took out a tablet. "Would you like to see this?" As she handed over the tablet, clear footage was displayed. Vanessa, in a white nurse's uniform, injecting something into an 4 bag. The recording clearly showed her carefully checking her surroundings before leaving the room. "Do you know this person?" Martha asked quietly. Tears welled up in Rebecca's eyes. "She's my sister. I'm sorry, but we've also contacted the police. She's currently being detained in the hospital's security office." Rebecca was speechless with shock. She held her head and leaned against the wall. Why would Vanessa do such a thing? Police officers approached from down the hallway. "Mrs. Monroe," the lead officer addressed her. "We're investigating based on your report. May we see the video footage?" Rebecca nodded silently and opened her laptop to show the footage. The officers watched the video and took notes. "This is clear evidence," the officer said with a stern expression. "Your sister, Vanessa Clark, is already in custody. We're taking her to the police station now for formal questioning." "What was she injecting?" Rebecca asked in a hoarse voice. "That will be determined by testing. The 4 bag has been preserved as evidence." After the officers left, Rebecca entered Aiden's room and sat next to her sleeping son. Holding his small hand, she was at a loss for words, confused and saddened. As the morning sun began to illuminate the Boston skyline, Rebecca woke up at Aiden's bedside. She hadn't left her son's side all night. The doctors had conducted tests throughout the night and reported that small amounts of immunosuppressants had been detected in Aiden's body. The quantity wasn't life-threatening, but it was enough to worsen the symptoms of his autoimmune disease. Mom? Aiden opened his eyes. What happened? It seems like a lot of people came into the room yesterday. Rebecca gently held her son's hand. There was a bit of confusion. But don't worry, everything's fine now. Dr. Parker quietly entered the room. Mrs. Monroe, may I speak with you? In the hallway, the doctor began speaking in a low voice. The test results are in. The substance detected in your son's 4 was cyclosporin, an immunosuppressant. This drug is not part of his treatment. It appears to have been administered in small doses regularly, which is related to the irregular worsening of his symptoms. How long? Rebecca asked in a trembling voice. At least 2 weeks, probably longer, judging from the drug screening results. Anger swelled in Rebecca's chest. For more than 2 weeks, her sister had been poisoning her son. Vanessa. She's being questioned at the police station. If you say you want to talk to her, permission might be granted. 2 hours later, Rebecca was sitting in a cold metal chair at the Boston police station. Across from her sat Vanessa, in handcuffs. Her face was pale, and her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Why? Rebecca looked straight into her sister's eyes. Why do this to Aiden? He's just a child, your nephew. Vanessa was silent for a moment. In her eyes was a mixture of fear, shame, and another emotion, resentment. You wouldn't understand, Vanessa finally said. Her voice was trembling, but there was coldness in it. You were always perfect. At school, at work, in life. Our parents always praised you. Look up to Rebecca. Why can't you be more like Rebecca? Rebecca looked at her sister in surprise. And that's a reason to harm a child. Jealousy from long ago. I just wanted to get your attention, Vanessa's voice cracked. I wanted to put a small crack in your perfect life. I didn't mean to really hurt Aiden, not a fatal dose, just enough to worsen the symptoms. Was that your intention from the beginning? Vanessa looked away. No, not at first. At first it was. What? What was it at first? Rebecca pressed. Brian, Vanessa finally confessed. I loved Brian. Rebecca froze. What? Since college, since you brought him home. But he never looked at me. It was always just you. Tears flowed from Vanessa's eyes. Last year, I tried to seduce him. I wanted to create a rift in your marriage. What did you do? Rebecca's voice was ice cold. I went to his workplace. Invited him to dinner. Kept sending messages, but he rejected me. I love Rebecca and Aiden, please stay away, he said. Suddenly, all the pieces started falling into place. Brian's suspicious behavior, late homecomings, unexplained messages. So you took revenge? Rebecca said in a choked voice. At first, I tried to ruin his reputation. I stole his phone and created fake messages and search histories. To make you suspicious of him. Vanessa covered her face with her hands. But that wasn't enough. I wanted you to feel real pain, so Aiden. Rebecca was at a loss for words. You're crazy. I'm sick, Vanessa said quietly. I need help. I know that. After leaving the interrogation room, Rebecca spoke with the detective in the hallway. According to her statement, the goal was to worsen Aiden's symptoms and extend his hospitalization. Dr. Finley says Mrs. Monroe's sister shows pathological jealousy and borderline personality disorder traits. Are there any other accomplices? Rebecca asked. My husband. Our investigation shows that your husband, Brian Monroe, is uninvolved. Rather, he's one of the victims. His phone was temporarily stolen, and messages and search histories were altered. Also, we have found that he was troubled by your sister's stalking behavior. Rebecca leaned against the wall. Did my husband talk to the police? Why didn't he tell me? According to his testimony, he wanted to preserve domestic peace and didn't want to damage the relationship between you and your sister. The detective looked at her with sympathetic eyes. Also, he said he had no evidence and thought it would only upset you. In another room, Brian was waiting. When Rebecca entered, he stood up. His face showed deep fatigue and concern. Rebecca. He struggled to find words. I should have told you earlier, about Vanessa. Why did you keep quiet? Rebecca asked quietly. At first, I thought you wouldn't believe me. She's your sister. And I didn't think she would go this far. He held his head. That woman, Samantha, was a divorce attorney. I was consulting her about how to protect myself from Vanessa. And the reason you rarely visited Aiden in the hospital was I was afraid of running into Vanessa. I couldn't predict what she might do. So I tried to go at different times. Brian's voice was filled with regret. That night too, I had contacted security and asked them to increase their rounds. After a long silence, they looked at each other. Both felt they were facing the most severe test of their married life. How's Aiden? Brian finally asked. Now that the drug administration has stopped, his symptoms are improving. The doctors say he might be discharged in a week. Rebecca showed a tired smile. 3 days later, a preliminary hearing was held in court. Vanessa was charged with second-degree assault and harm to a child, but the defense argued for diminished responsibility due to mental illness. According to psychiatric testimony, Vanessa was diagnosed with abnormal behavior triggered by severe jealousy and borderline personality disorder. The judge ultimately ordered confinement in a state psychiatric facility and mandatory treatment rather than criminal incarceration. As she left the courtroom, Rebecca saw Vanessa being led away by officers. Her sister turned back, and their eyes met for a moment. There was remorse in those eyes. Rebecca watched her sister go with mixed feelings. Anger, betrayal, sadness, and strangely, a small amount of compassion. She needs long-term treatment, Rebecca said to Brian. The two held hands and headed toward the hospital. 6 months later, the Monroe family's life had returned to a quiet routine. Aiden had fully recovered, returned to school, and rejoined his baseball team. Did you see that batting just now? Aiden ran excitedly to his parents. Today was a game for his baseball team, and both parents had come to cheer him on. That was wonderful, Aiden, Rebecca smiled and hugged her son. That's my boy, Brian patted his shoulder. At this rate, becoming a pro player isn't just a dream. On the way home, Rebecca squeezed her husband's hand. After that incident, the two had received couples counseling and were gradually rebuilding their trust. Ironically, if that incident hadn't happened, we might have gotten divorced, she said quietly. Maybe so, Brian nodded. But let's not look back anymore. Let's just look forward. Back home, while Aiden was taking a bath, Rebecca told Brian her decision. I'm going to visit Vanessa tomorrow. Brian looked at his wife with surprise. Are you sure you're okay with that? I don't know. But I need to try. The next day, Rebecca visited the Massachusetts State Psychiatric Facility. For the first few visits, Vanessa had refused to meet. But Rebecca didn't give up. It was not so much for her sister as for healing her own heart's wounds. On the 5th visit, Vanessa finally agreed to meet. She was thin and pale, but there was a calmness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Why do you come? Vanessa asked in a small voice. You must hate me. Rebecca took a deep breath. You're my sister. No matter what happens, that won't change. I'm sorry. Tears welled up in Vanessa's eyes. Aiden, is he okay? He's fine. He's completely recovered and has started playing baseball again. I'm glad. Vanessa nodded slightly. Tell him that his aunt is truly sorry. On the way back, Rebecca spoke with the attending physician. She is sincerely committed to her treatment, the doctor said. The road to recovery is long, but she's definitely making progress. Support from family is a great help. On Aiden's 9th birthday, Rebecca found the courage to tell her son the truth. She and Brian had consulted beforehand about an age-appropriate way to explain. Aiden, you know your aunt is in the hospital, right? Rebecca gently began. Actually, your aunt has a mental illness. Because of her illness, she couldn't understand that what she was doing was wrong. Aiden listened to his mother with a serious expression. Did Aunt put medicine in me? His intuitive understanding surprised Rebecca. Yes. But now she's receiving proper treatment. Your aunt is very remorseful. Aiden thought for a moment and said, I hope Aunt gets better. I forgive her. At those sincere words, Rebecca couldn't stop the tears from flowing. She was deeply moved by the fact that a child's pure heart could easily grant forgiveness that is difficult for adults. That night, after putting Aiden to bed, Rebecca and Brian sat on the porch looking up at the starry sky. There's a lot to learn from that child, Rebecca whispered. Indeed, Brian put his arm around his wife's shoulder. Our family almost broke, but we've been reborn stronger. Rebecca nodded at those words. Many challenges still lay ahead of them. The path to rebuilding their relationship with Vanessa would be long, and it would take time for the family's wounds to fully heal. But now she was certain. True recovery isn't just about the pain disappearing, but about finding the strength to overcome it and grow. And a real family is one whose bonds are proven in the midst of trials.